The religious aren't really good at thinking, are they? If they were, it wouldn't be so simple to trash their ideas and disprove their claims. And that's what we're going to do today, although the faithful never seem to care because, screw reality. Reality just doesn't matter, only their pathetic fee-fees do. So that's a lot to look forward to, isn't it? Away we go. So this time we're off to a channel called Thinker of Thoughts. And you'll see why that's such a ridiculous name as we go on. And Brad Wilcox, who wants to tell us that you need God to be good. Except all of the evidence directly contradicts that, but again, who cares about reality, right? These people really are crazy, aren't they? Let's go look at yet another example and prove every bit of religious crap that comes out of his mouth is absolutely wrong. Because it's really not that hard.
A study was done and released recently that was called The Global God Divide.
And I've gone ahead and provided a link to that in the description. It's from Pew Research, and as I'm sure he's going to get to in a second, it discusses whether or not you need God to be good. And this is nothing new. We've talked about it around here before, but it's interesting that the survey seems to indicate that the more religious the society in question is, the more likely the population is to say that God is necessary. And that's hardly a surprise. The less religious, the less likely they are to give a shit about God, period. My real question, though, is does a belief in God actually make you a more moral person? And the simple fact is that no, it doesn't. It's why religious adherents are vastly overrepresented in FBI prison entry statistics. Being religious doesn't make you a good person. In fact, it might make you a bad one. But let's get back to the video.
And it talked about how more young people today are identifying themselves as atheists than ever before. It also said that more people today say that you don't have to believe in God to be a good person.
And that's demonstrably true. In fact, it helps if you're not. This is really where I think a lot of these people, the religious in particular, confuse their feelings with reality when they're certainly not the same thing. They really want certain things to be true, regardless of whether or not they are, and therefore they simply pretend that their emotionally comforting beliefs must be so because they get a chemical buzz in the brain from thinking it's true. That means absolutely nothing. Reality is what reality is, no matter what craziness is going on between your ears. It's about time these people grew the hell up and figured that shit out.
You can still be an ethical and good person and not believe in God. So it all sounds really good on paper. Oh, you believe, I don't believe, that's fine. We're all just getting along. But guess what? The study shows that when a crisis hits, that's when suddenly a belief in God makes a difference.
Not really, because the study also shows that the more educated you are, the more wealthy you are, the more advanced the society in which you happen to live happens to be, the less likely you are to take the whole God thing seriously in the first place. Now, we'll get back to his ideas in a second. I just wanted to point out that the people least likely to pay attention to these silly God claims, they're also least likely to need to. When something really bad happens, whatever that happens to be, these societies are far better equipped to handle it than those that really take religion seriously. Those people tend to be poor, uneducated, and technologically ill-prepared to actually fix the shit on their own. They have little alternative but to get on their knees and talk to themselves because they lack the resources to just get on their feet and go do something about it. When society breaks down, their people just aren't educated enough to keep it all together without relying on an imaginary friend. That's not a problem with a belief in a god. That's a problem with terrible societies.
Because those who believe are the ones who will turn and help someone else.
Bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. Now, we see this all the time when there's a disaster, especially somewhere distant, usually in the third world, and the religious are the ones who aren't sending money directly to those most affected. They're not sending doctors and food and supplies to get the people back on their feet. No, the religious, they're sending Bibles and preachers, two things that are totally useless in that situation. Now, I've said this before, but the religious really aren't interested in helping people for the sake of helping people. They look at tragedy as a means to push their religion on others. We can see this with religious homeless programs, for example, where they're happy to give you a sandwich if only you'd listen to a sermon first. They might give you a cot for the night, so long as you're willing to profess belief in their imaginary friend. There's always a cost involved. They don't care about the people, they care about the converts. This is absolutely reprehensible, yet every time that there's a disaster, we see it play out exactly the same way. Secular relief efforts go to help the people with no strings attached. The religious are just trying to win souls. Yeah, fuck them.
And those who don't believe, their true colors come out. Well, they say they can be ethical, they say they can be nice, but when the crisis hits, it's the non-believers who will step all over anyone who's in their path to reach their selfish aim, to reach their own ambitious desire.
Citation needed, because that is total bullshit. The biggest charitable organizations around the world, the ones that go out and help the most people, those are almost all purely secular. The Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, Children International, the United Way, Amnesty International, the ACLU, Goodwill, UNICEF. These are all purely secular organizations, and that's only a small list that I provided, that are out there on the front lines every single day helping people who need help with no agenda whatsoever. They're not sending books of mythology to poverty-stricken areas. They are there on the ground providing demonstrable aid to people in need. No gods required.
So the way we believe in God affects the way we see ourselves, and it affects the way we treat other people.
Right. Because if we think some imaginary father figure in the sky is going to swoop in and save the day, we don't get off our asses and actually put the work in. We just ask that shit get done and we go back to watching TV. It's the people who know that we have no one to rely on but ourselves that mobilize and actually go do the work. You don't see a lot of Christians getting off their asses and actually going to help anyone. At most just give money, mostly just to their churches, of which the majority of that is just upkeep and salaries for their shyster pastors, but they don't actually go and give money to the groups that are actually helping anyone directly. That's not charity. You want to know who gives the most in charitable contributions these days? Millennials. According to nonprofit source, 84% of millennials give money to charity every single year. And which group is least likely to be religious in the modern world? Yeah, you guessed it, millennials. So the least religious group gives the most. Imagine that.
So, can we just say, oh, that's fine. You believe what you want. I'll believe what I want. No, believing in God matters.
No, it actually doesn't, which is why the second you look at the actual data, and I've provided links to all of this in the description, all of this religious horseshit falls apart instantly. This is just feel-good nonsense intended for a religious audience which gobbles it up uncritically. It doesn't stand up to a moment's critical scrutiny.
Because it changes the way we view and treat each other. There was a professor at BYU, a law professor, who spoke to the university community in a devotional, and he said this: what if we're wrong? What if God doesn't exist? He said, I am willing to be wrong in this way. If it means believing and treating others as if they are children of God, with the potential of becoming beings like unto a perfect and perfectly loving God. I'd rather make the mistake of attributing meaning and love to a universe that is meaningless and indifferent than vice versa.
Not in practice, that's just not how it works. The religious, by and large, treat people in their particular cult with love, at least if they're doing what they're told, and they treat everyone else like crap, or like fodder to be converted to their cult, and we've already seen that side of it. They don't just treat people, everybody, everyone they come across well. It takes 30 seconds on Google to see that. How many Christians are out there right now screaming that gays should be put to death? And it's certainly not only the Christians that are doing that, because it's high on the list of things to detest for the Muslims too, but you don't see atheists doing that, do you? You don't see atheists, by and large anyway, looking down on anyone just because of the color of their skin or the bits between their legs. You don't see atheists telling people who they can and can't sleep with, who they can and can't marry, who they can and can't love. That's all the religious. From the theistic viewpoint, if you don't believe in their God, and sometimes even if you do, then you're just a worthless piece of shit sinner. If they can con you into converting, well, that might be different, but they're still going to look down on you until you join their club. Because that's really what this is all about, joining their club. It's not about being good to people for the sake of being good. It's not about being a decent human being, because they don't really care about that. It's all about making your cult larger. And it's funny how they refuse to talk about that, isn't it?
Besides, he said, we're not wrong. Love is the most powerful force in the universe.
That would actually be the strong nuclear force, or as Einstein once said, compound interest. This is just emotional pablum spouted by people who don't have a brain in their heads. That's really the problem with the religious. They don't care if any of this nonsense is real, so long as it makes them happy. And newsflash for you losers, your happiness doesn't actually matter. That's something they desperately need to figure out. Reality goes by whether you're happy or sad or anything in between. They can't quite get that through their heads that they are not the most important thing to ever have existed. Well, how dare you? And unfortunately, they're not alone. There are a lot of non-religious people who operate every bit as much on the overly emotional religious model without actually including traditional religion, and they've got all the same problems. Because you're just not the hot shit that you'd like to think that you are. Deal with it.
Can you see love? Can you prove love exists?
Absolutely. fMRIs do it just fine. Of course, love isn't the magical thing that a lot of people want to think that it is. It's just an electrochemical state in your brain, just like everything else that you are. But that's not comforting to the religious and other people, sadly, who refuse to acknowledge the truth. Because, who the hell cares about the truth, right?
Can you sense love with your senses? Or does it go beyond that? He says this. He says, love is the most powerful force in the universe, and I'm not sure we have any reason to believe love is real if we reject the existence of God, who's the source of love.
We can prove love. Now, how about you do the same thing with your imaginary friend? Yeah, we know they can't, and they won't even try, because this is all about fifis and, facts can just go fuck themselves. This is the pathetic nature of the emotionally frail. It's all about them and their comfort and their happiness, and if reality gets in the way of that, reality has to go. Except reality isn't going anywhere. Reality doesn't care how you feel. Your feelings are irrelevant. Maybe it's time you got that simple fact through your tiny little brain. Give it a shot.
We don't apologize for believing in God. There are a lot of people who have felt the Titanic tip, and suddenly they're realizing that maybe their life was missing something because they had chosen not to believe in God.
No, not really. Not rational people, anyhow. If you're going to throw intellect and critical thinking and all the things that make you a decent human being right out the window, then maybe. But doing so is utterly stupid, and why in the hell would you want to do that? This is yet another example of religious idiocy by Brad Wilcox. But I want it. So the fuck what? Just because you want it doesn't mean you get it. Just because it makes you tingle inside when you think about your imaginary friend, that doesn't make your imaginary friend real. Only reality does, and you don't seem particularly interested in that, do you? This channel is called Thinker of Thoughts, but it's more like Feeler of Fifis, because there's nothing here identifiable as rational, intellectual, critically evaluated thoughts whatsoever. It's why they come to the conclusions that they do, and why we have to point out just how dumb it all is. What they are doing is actually dangerous. Pretending that the things in your head outweigh the things that actually exist, that's hazardous, not only to the believer, but to everyone around them. You need to be afraid of people who legitimately think they can take their hands off the wheel and let Jesus drive. Because there are people who have actually done that, and it doesn't turn out well. These people are fucking crazy. They just are. There is simply no way to deny it, and it doesn't matter what nonsensical crap you've stuffed into your skull. If it can't be objectively demonstrated, then you are a fucking loon. Seek professional help and stop talking to yourself. We could do with a lot less people like you. Just go the fuck away.
Boom, dicky, 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 boom.